So I'm so excited to be here talking to you, Fremont. We've just been having this backstage chat and had several phone calls preparing for this. I thought maybe before we start, you should give a little bit of your background because it's so impressive. And then we can launch into a conversation about the past, present, and future of where we see AI going.
Very good. Yeah. So I've been in technology for a long time, probably 30 years. Really started as a hobby, and it didn't really become a professional thing until about 15 years ago when there was a lot of change happening and there's a lot of opportunity. Been in the services-oriented business of implementing technology across a number of different companies. Probably the most notable in the most recent past was a company called Chaotic Moon that we built and sold to Accenture in 2015. And then I had the opportunity, we'd been doing a lot of AI along that journey, and long before the marketers sort of got hold of the word AI and really overhyped it, we had been sort of really investigating some of the trend lines that were happening through a lot of the offerings we're providing for our customers. Ultimately, once we sold that business to Accenture, I was asked to help build and run the practice for AI that we built. There's a lot of learning around where the chasms of knowledge. Is this better? Okay. Yeah, where the chasms of knowledge and from the provider and the buyer in terms of implementing this sort of stuff. And so really the thesis of Hypergiant, for which my partner Ben Lamb and I started just about 18 months ago, was really to provide this sort of foundational understanding, a very pragmatic approach to employing intelligent technology at scale. Hypergiant Industries is a pretty exciting company that I think is sort of the first of its kind industrial complex that is focused on intelligent technology at scale across really all sectors and all sort of components of technology, taking a 360-degree view. And the sort of anchor of the business is really providing that sort of approach to enterprise and helping them transform. We're laughing about the overuse of the word transform, but ultimately really helping them sort of emerge into this new era of technology.
Interesting. And just to prepare everyone, we thought we would chat for about 15 minutes and then open it up for questions. So everyone should start thinking about their questions now. Well, one of the things I found fascinating about connecting with you, and we literally met very recently, was how similarly we see the world. So I'm a co-founder of a company called Collective Eye, which provides AI to help enterprises better manage, predict, and grow revenue, which is not the same wheelhouse as you, but there is AI there. And I think both of us, having been successful in the past, have committed ourselves to a future that we think is going to be very, very different than the one we currently reside in. It might be helpful just to sort of take a journey in time and talk about the frameworks of the past, move into the present, and then talk about the future. And maybe we'll just have a conversation about, along the way, what we see as necessary for people to prepare for that journey.
Yeah, I mean, those who know me probably get really exhausted me talking about history as much as I do, and I was not a history major, but I think it helps really inform a lot of where we're at. I think one of the challenges you and I have talked about is that in this industry right now, currently, it seems to be that AI, in quotes, is this sort of new thing. And I had the opportunity to teach at UT last year, University of Texas in Austin, and I was teaching the new generation of designers how to design for AI. And what I found was necessary, and I continued to find this to be necessary with my partners and customers, was to educate them on the history. So I sort of wrote this lecture that starts in antiquity, about 1500 BC, and talks about the Iliad and how Hephaestus, the god of craftsmanship and artisans, was the Greek mythology was thinking about smart machines. It was very anthropomorphized, but you run through history. I won't bore all of us with this history lesson, but I'll sort of run through it. You get through a lot of mythology thinking about humans thinking about smart machines for millennia. And then, in the 1600s and a lot of the polymaths and philosophers really sort of finding and discovering that they could express reason through mathematics, and some of the techniques and sort of advancements in mathematics was really coupled with philosophy. And they started to really think about how do you express the same thing that we're doing as humans, thinking in these deep ways through mathematics. And they really made some really amazing treatises that were written at that time, some very bright thinkers. And then you go forward into the early 20th century, and you've got a lot of the sort of advanced changes happening. And you've got Alan Turing, who we all know, and sort of then in Dartmouth College in 1956, you suddenly have this birth of AI where John McCarthy has asked the community to call it AI. This is 1956, right? And so a lot of the next, the generation of people that are responsible in this, sort of employing this, have to really take a sober look at how long we've been advancing these techniques. And so then the question ultimately becomes, okay, so if the past was so robust with AI, which we've actively been doing, I think anybody who's been in this for a while, we've been actively doing AI for 70 years successfully in very vertical slices. But so what's different now is that all the work we've done around the infrastructure and the commoditization of cloud and compute, storage, connectivity, all these things allow us suddenly to do something far more meaningful than these vertical slices of work and think about things in a very abstracted horizontal fashion. So that's sort of when I think about the past, I really like to be anchored in the reality of how we got to where we are, because I think it helps inform how we approach the next era.
So I was a history major, so I'll keep you honest. And I recently wrote an op-ed for the New York Times where I was sort of taking a contrarian view about privacy and saying that people were using privacy as a way to stop progress. And my thesis was that the paradigm of the past, the way that we've looked at business, the way that we've looked at the world, has changed so fundamentally that you can't transport that paradigm into decision-making today. And you and I had a couple of conversations around that. I mean, maybe you could give some thoughts about, as a person like me who sells into the C-suite and advocates for the future, how would you think about it? What's the framework, and what do you think is missing in some of the thought process of people who you speak to today?
Well, when one of the things that I think is the biggest challenge is that education gap. A lot of times when we're asked, okay, we don't really fit into a box currently in our current state. People always ask, what's your competition? Who is your competition? And our first answer is always education.
Right.
Because you've got a lot of very senior executives that have slogged through, climbing the ladder. Some of them heavily in technology, some not, really being pressured into utilizing this new sort of era of computing, if we want to call it that, of AI. And the challenge is bringing them back to a very pragmatic view, because one of the things that I think is problematic is there's misunderstanding of the true decision makers at the top having an understanding of the challenges that they face. We talked about the advent of the internet, right? And the challenges that we faced just having companies adopt it. And you were so poignantly pointing out that you could be a laggard at adopting a website. You could wait 5 years really and still be okay. But the pace of change that we all face is so dramatic, and the complexity of what we're facing right now is exponentially more complex. And then, we then talked about, I talked about the fact that, the internet was one thing, and you had about 5 years you could probably catch up. But then mobile came on, right? Between, after the iPhone in 2007, the advent of mobile adoption became really important to enterprise, and it was chaos. If anybody remembers, it was just chaos with the mobile transformation. Just simply putting an endpoint at the edge of the enterprise was a serious problem. And that was hard and difficult. We got through it, and nobody really emphasizes mobile anymore as sort of this anchor. It's just sort of commoditized into the business. AI, though, is
completely global across a enterprise. And it's far more complex because it touches every segment of the business if employed correctly. And the challenges that I think a lot of these big enterprises and a lot of these decision makers face, do they have the guts to invest the time and the money into actually doing this transformation that everybody's really, really pushing?
Yeah, no, and I don't know about you, but if anyone here has ever watched Downton Abbey, you have this like sinking feeling. You feel so sorry for that family because you're like, okay, I know you will be irrelevant because I know the end of the story. And sometimes it feels that way when you go into certain companies where people see AI as a sideshow. So it's an initiative. I'll put it in this corner, and then I'll keep doing everything I do over here so I have an answer to it. I'm wondering, what is it that what are the examples you give people or framework you give them to think about it as a more holistic and truly transformative in the real meaning of that word way?
So, I think one of the things I really definitely try to help demystify is that AI is somehow magic, right? There's no magic to it, really. It's very, very systematic, frankly. And it's not always sexy. I think we're still in a very adolescent phase of this, or even elementary phase in where we're heading. And so some of the challenges we face is a lot of times people are going through some sort of transformation or being pressured to do some sort of advancement, and they say, well, we're not ready. We're not ready for AI because of this, that, or that. They always have an excuse. And
what do you think that's code for? Is it fear? Is it?
I think it's misunderstanding the fact that having robust API layers across your organization that abstract into a better system with governance around data and clean data, and do you need to store all this shitty data that you've collected over the years? Is it usable? That's actually part of the journey of AI. It's very mundane and very boring, frankly, and it's very traditional IT, but you have to look at those choices that you're making through a different lens. You have to look at how you're making the decisions for a future state differently than you did 5 years ago. You're still doing ultimately the same work, though. And a lot of times people get a little bit beside themselves, especially if it's a senior executive making a decision about investing in it because there's a lot of board pressure or whatever, and then not necessarily being informed. And then a partner comes in and says, we're so excited you're going to do this, and let's transform the business and really set it up for advanced, intelligent work within the machines. And we're about 18 months out until we get your data hygiene, situated and your governance. And they're like, whoa, 18 months? I got to show results next quarter. And there's this blank look that, can't we just do something? And then it sort of, it starts to snowball, and you start doing these little innovation projects to prove that you're doing AI, but it actually has no business value.
Yeah.
So, I think those are the challenges that are often being faced right now with some of these traditional companies. I think the luxury a lot of people represented in this room have is that the companies are sort of initiated as a technology-first business with maybe one core platform that is being offered to consumers or businesses, and they have the ability to sort of claim that stake in AI because their entire business is based on technology. But when you think about some of these traditional businesses trying to catch up,
it's going to be very hard, I think.
Very difficult, yes.
Yeah, I heard Tom Siebel speak, because he's now he was the inventor of CRM, and now he's doing an AI business. And he said, the companies that adopt AI will acquire the ones that don't. He just said it flat out and said, either you're going to get on the bus or you're basically going to be irrelevant. And I think that's a very hard thing for a person in a position of leadership, particularly in a public company, to fully internalize. AI is not a quarter-to-quarter initiative. It's a true overarching transformation.
Well, yeah, we talked about this earlier, which was, are you willing to double spend? When you're actually building models to replicate some of the work that people have been slogging through for years, far beyond RPA and just simple automation, when you're doing more complex work, are you willing to invest 12 months of building that system to to be a sidearm to the people still doing the work, it's double spend, it's double time. There's no version of us buying technology off the shelf, at least in this current state of the environment, to be able to buy a piece of equipment or SaaS product that we just stop what people are doing, we turn the key, and it turns on this magic AI system that people then, takes over this work that's been done traditionally. And that's really challenging because the complexity we're talking about runs these timelines that are sometimes completely untenable for these corporations because they're reporting to the street on a quarterly basis, and they're beholden to all these sort of quarterly and annual problems. Are they willing to actually do what, I don't mean to overuse this, but the Amazons of the world, Jeff did a pretty darn good job of not turning a profit for a very long time as he was really establishing his position in a very broad swath, and kept telling the board, just trust me, the future is a little bit farther out, and we have to, lay our claims on all these things. And then ultimately, he turned that, in one quarter, turned a profit that was just out of this world. So
the 14 years
that's
prior.
Right.
What's sort of and then I'm going to open up to questions. What's sort of the North Star you would say a leader has to have to? I do think it was striking too how much you and I agree on how human the challenge. It's more of a human challenge than technology. The technology is relatively boring, right? I mean, just conceptually, it's a framework, it's a way of doing something. But the real impact comes from the humans on it and the leaders that shepherd it through their organizations. If you were, the CEO of a big incumbent Fortune 50 company, and you were thinking about this, what would be the framework you would be using?
It's a great question, and I think I would first, because some of these organizations are so political, I would do a complete, meeting of the minds at the very top to get buy-in in understanding this sort of transformation to intelligent technology. I even try to avoid the term AI because it's so overused. But if you're really embracing this new era of advanced intelligent technology at scale, and you don't have top-down support and understanding, these bottom-up initiatives are going to fail miserably because they are going to burn costs. They're going to be longer in timeline for ROI and all these things. And so you have to collectively agree. And so one of the things that we are always passionate about, if we have our druthers when it comes to our partners, we started at the very, very top, help establish that meta-narrative of what it means to employ this technology at scale. And then go in vertically and start to attack the problems. And so many times it's still just those, getting the data right, getting the organization right, and then the change management of working it's just a very complex problem. And if it doesn't start at the top, to your point, if you're not going to invest in AI, you're going to be bought by someone who did, right? And that's just a fact. And I know we've always been in this technology circle, has been talking about disruption and change and all this, but it's only getting accelerated, and it's almost just table stakes now. So if you're not doing anything, you should just expect to get taken out at some point.
Questions? Wait for the mic. I think there's runners. There's someone in front here.
Hi. Let's say that call it a CIO at a large company. And I have a mandate from C-level to AI my company. What is a good framework? I want to say heuristic, but maybe more complex, like framework I could use, because no matter where I look at my IT spend, I can do that plus AI, right? If it's marketing automation or supply chain management, whatever I'm into, I can go buy a point solution or an enterprise solution that contains whatever I've already bought plus AI, or I can bolt it on. And how can I understand where I should buy that complete product versus invest in, in greenfield organic products that I build myself with my own team?
Yeah. So my perspective on it is, one, I would start with finding out how serious the mandate is. So what is the budget that you're getting? Because if it's sort of nominal and someone wants just to be able to go on a conference call to the street and say, we're doing this initiative, then it's not really very serious. So I would get the mandate, the actual mandate first. The second thing I would do is say, what about our overall business is going to be done differently as a result of AI? And that would probably be where I would look to internally invest. And then for every other function, I would look and say, what are the companies that have accessed the right data set to train the machine on a massive level that can then bring that knowledge and that transformation internally? So the part that I would do in-house would be a very small sliver. I don't know if you agree on this compared to what I would look to outsource. But it starts with a holistic view of how is my company going to look in 5 years through an AI lens? How are people going to work? How are our products going to be delivered differently? And what is AI, and what part of AI is enabling that? And then how do I parse it out so that the transformation happens at the right time, at the right part of the business to make that 5-year plan materialize?
Yeah, I agree. I think the challenge is right now we don't know enough. There's no platforms that can serve as a monolithic sort of source of truth for these things yet. And I think the complexity is that when you're buying technology at point problems that you have to sort of pick one platform, and it would be irresponsible to build something from scratch, do something that someone's spent a lot of time developing. The challenge is are you locking yourself into an ecosystem that doesn't allow you to abstract that information out into a larger corpus of information so that it's usable in a horizontal fashion for the organization? That's the future state. So I really am passionate about the ownership of the unique intelligence that is represented of that company. Let's think about more of a science fiction era. If you have a AI, or whatever we want to call it, that really houses the information that is important to the business, and the culture, and the nuance, and the challenges, the nomenclature that's so unique. You go from competitor to competitor, and it's vastly different. Even if they're in the exact same sector selling the exact same products, internally, the way they do things, their processes are very unique to them. And I believe that that ownership of the intelligence has to be the companies itself, and then decide where to partner with other people on platforms to support that. The challenges have been, you've got these cloud environments, and Azure's really picking up speed right now in terms of having a wonderful set of AI tools and being able to sort of encapsulate all of your data into one area and protect it. It's really going to be a case by case. You got to make the decision of what you're going to own to begin with, and it isn't everything. It's certainly not everything. I think it's still being determined how much.
Well, what data you have, because I think the thing that's markedly different about this technological revolution is it's totally data-driven. And if you don't have the data in-house in a scalable, usable way to train the machine, you will not get usable intelligence. And so that, to me, that would be like the governing. If I don't have access to this data, I have to figure out a platform or method to do that that's scalable. And then you can start to have proprietary intelligence. And I don't know if you disagree. I mean, I think people look at it and say, oh, I'm going to implement AI, and the AI is only as good as the machine. Like I say, if you liken a machine to a child, and you say you give a child 5 books to read their whole life, that's as smart as the child will be at the end of 18 years. Whereas if you give them an unlimited number of books to read, they get much smarter. And so the question is, what books do you have internally to educate your machine? And how much of that intelligence is going to be lost by not having a data set that's larger? It's a very specific example, like using Google for marketing, right? Why would you ever create your own search engine?
Right.
If you can go to a Google and they're going to be like way smarter about search, you can. I mean, technologically, anyone can create a search engine. I mean, Microsoft did it, and how many people here use Bing, right? Like that's, I think, to me, a good metaphor also for AI, which is like the reason to start today, if it's proprietary and internal to your organization, is you don't want to be the Bing of your industry, right? You waited too long to train your machines. You waited too long to create that infrastructure, and somebody else created a better one, and literally, it's game over. Questions?
In my experience with a large enterprise, I think a lot of the challenges I'm still seeing is the budget and where the responsibilities lie in the entire process of starting and implementing AI across different business lines. Is there a particular structure that you've seen work very effectively, even across like the CTO, the CIO, and the different business units?
The larger the business, the more complex it is, right? You have to do a little bit of tin cupping, I think, from what I've seen to date. As the executive team that sort of agrees in doing this, you got to go, depending on how complex the business, if it's got a corporate structure with a group level and sub-brands and subsidiaries, it becomes more complex because you have to get, we're talking billions of dollars. We're not talking millions or hundreds of millions. We're talking billions and billions of dollars over the next decade for each individual enterprise that's, a global 1,000 or whatever. This is a very, very costly endeavor. And in the short term, I think it requires just buy-in and to be able to have people contribute budgets, because I would say if anybody internally at any organization is discrediting what's happening or not acknowledging that this is actually an industrial revolution, they're going to fail, and you should probably fire that person. I mean, literally fire that person, because it's something that is so going to hit people over the head. I don't really love technology. Ironically, I live sort of on a ranch outside of Austin, Texas, and I'm very non-technological at home because I sort of need to break free. But I'm constantly telling my partners that if they aren't moving now, they're going to get so left behind, because if one of their competitors does it right in any capacity, the acceleration of positive direction up into the right for that competitor is going to be so dramatic. It's going to be very, very difficult, if not impossible, to catch up. And so budgets are really a big deal right now. And I don't necessarily have a perfect answer for it, because every organization has a different structure on how they fund these things.
Yeah, I would say the ones that I've seen are most successful is they have a mandate from the CEO, they have real dollars behind it, they have functional business owners who have decision-making ability to buy the technology directly without a ton of bureaucracy. Because you can, in any big company, you can find the one person who presents every risk and every reason not to do something. And so in order to go against that wave, it's almost like you have to, say anoint an AI task force internally and say, you've got dollars, you've got decision-making authority, and you have time. You just have to have a thesis and go for it. I think we're out of time. I don't want to, is there one more question maybe? Getting in trouble. So.
That's it. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
We're done.
Thank you.